So we're just going to run through a bit of a background to the project, just to get your heads around that bit. So I'm just moving the slides forward as I speak. So we did quite a bit of research before we started this project. The problem that we were trying to solve is feedback was coming back to Bob Alexander and Paul Baumann. Bob Alexander is head of NHSI and Paul Baumann, head of NHS England, that the number and quality of applicants for FD and CFO vacancies wasn't at the level that they wanted it to be. So the number of people applying for FD and CFO roles and the quality of those applications, not necessarily the quality of the people, but the quality of the applications wasn't as high as they wanted to see. So what was actually happening was quite a few DOF and CFO posts were being filled by interim staff, which is an incredibly expensive way for the NHS to resource its need for finance leaders. So that was the problem that we set out to try and solve, or at least understand more about. So the first thing that we wanted to understand, well, what is actually preventing people from coming forwards for the roles? And the two things that came out, which won't surprise anyone, it was there were real concerns about the work-life balance that was possible for a senior finance leader role in the NHS at the moment. And people were concerned about the stress of the role. And what we understood by that wasn't that, well, we're never going to get people to apply because actually it's a horrible job, was that people wanted access to a lot more training and support in order to make the transition from deputy finance role to director of finance role. And they also wanted to feel part of a cohort of people who could network and support each other, particularly in their early days in those jobs. So the research did some more digging as to really what were the practical development needs that current aspiring finance leaders had. And on a practical level, leading system change. So you'll all know this, the NHS system is changing at a pace. People are being asked to work collaboratively across the system with local authorities and other organisations, and don't necessarily have any experience about how to build those kind of collaborative relationships. Building relationships, so both within your own organisation and, as we've just talked about, across organisations, a fundamental skill for a senior finance leader now is the ability to build effective working relationships. And then, as we sort of explained before, it's a time of huge change, and many people felt that they didn't have the knowledge, skills and expertise in order to lead change management in their own organisation. So we'd understood a bit more about the problem that we were trying to solve and ended up with this aim. So our aim is to build a diverse pool of talent that improves the number and quality of applicants for future finance leadership vacancies to support the NHS's goal of improving service delivery to patients. And I'd say we're still getting better at this. We have not there yet, but fundamental to what most people are doing in terms of thought leadership in the NHS now is very much connecting anything that we do at strategic level with improving service delivery for patients. I know it's blindingly obvious, but often I don't think we used approaches and languages that really embedded that, but we're definitely trying to do that now. And the other thing you'll notice there is to build a diverse pool of talent. So what we know and understand is at the moment we are underrepresented in terms of the number of women and the number of people from a BAME background in our senior finance team. And we had an explicit aim within the talent pool in order to build a more diverse pool of talent. So in terms of the key drivers for the programme, we definitely want to identify the best diverse available candidates. So we don't use positive discrimination, but what we do is work really hard with our female and BAME potential candidates to continue to improve the way that we make this programme attractive and accessible to people who are currently underrepresented in the senior finance community. We want the programme to be inclusive and transparent. So we want to make sure that it's really clear what the programme's about, how you can apply, and to make that process as transparent and fair as possible. We want to properly look after successful and unsuccessful candidates. So this is a competitive process. There will be winners and losers, if you like, but we want to make sure that even people who apply and whose application is not successful this year feel that they have learnt and developed through applying to the talent pool. And we want the programme to be responsive to regional and national priorities. So we want to understand through the programme much more about what are the regional needs around finance and leadership, as well as the national priorities around finance leadership in the NHS. So it's just a slide there in terms of diversity. This was produced by FFF and Edward Johns. So it did some really good data analysis of the representation of women and BAME employees at senior levels. And you can see from these graphs that there's very slow progress at the moment. And one of our real obstacles in aspiring finance leaders is, although there is good recruitment of women and BAME employees at junior levels in finance, in terms of people progressing to senior level, that's really slow. So it makes it quite a challenge for us to get enough applicants from female and BAME backgrounds into the pool process, but something that we're continuing to work on. So how do you get into the talent pool? Hopefully you want to after that bit. It's really simple. This year we have an application form to make it even easier to provide us, for people to provide us with the information that we need in order to make a decision as to whether they are at the right level in their career, skills, knowledge and attitudes to enter the talent pool. We have 4 regional boards, North, South, Midlands and East and London, who do telephone shortlisting from the paper applications, and the Leadership Academy separately do a desk exercise to give a rating to each application against the capabilities. And that's really to make sure that we don't have any unconscious bias in our system. So they're saying quantitatively these candidates should go through. The regional board read the applications, make their judgment, and from that we end up with a shortlist. Also this year, different regions will be shortlisting other regions' initial sift to remove any championing of particular candidates from directors of finance who really want to see people they know going through. So it should be a really fair process. There are then face-to-face regional interviews, so a panel of 5 people doing face-to-face interviews with those people that are successful. So last year we had 109 applications, 50 people were invited to a regional interview. And then 30 people were invited to join the talent pool. And once you've joined the talent pool, you've won, you're already in the talent pool. And you have access to, last year, a 2-day, this year, a 3-day development centre. I think I've just missed one. So here's the capabilities. These are available on the FFF website, and we'll give you a link to those. So we're recruiting people against these capabilities. So the key thing is you need to be able to articulate your current strengths and areas for improvement against these capabilities. This is a competitive process, so you want to represent yourself in the strongest way possible. But what we're really looking for is people that understand and show really good self-awareness about what their current strengths and areas for development are against these capabilities. Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong thing. So what does being in the talent pool involve? Well, it's a regional residential development centre. As I said, that was 2 days last year. It'll be 3 days this year. And that's an experiential learning experience, as we call it. So the purpose is to really feel what it's like to be a director of finance and to reflect on how you perform under that kind of pressure and in that environment, so that you come out of the development centre with a really detailed personal development plan that helps you in order to achieve your achieve the next step and become a director of finance. It's designed to be a very supportive, not competitive process, the residential development centre. You get access to 3 coaching sessions, so you meet your executive coach at the development centre, and then you have coaching at 3, 6 and 9 months. And the focus of that coaching is really to help you follow through on the aspirations that you set out in your personal development plan on a really practical level. So it might be, I'm not getting around to any of this because I've got a really busy day job. Or it might be, I really wanted to develop my influencing and negotiating skills. I'm not really sure what I can do in order to achieve that goal. You get 2 masterclasses, so common learning needs that come out of the personal development plans. We run 2 national masterclasses around those themes so that everyone has an opportunity for some classroom learning and discussion together. And at those masterclasses, you also get the opportunity to meet with the regional NHSI and NHSE representatives. So you start to get really hands-on understanding of some of the system issues that are relevant to your region, and to meet some of the people that are responsible for leading the system in your region. And you get 4 action learning sets in each of the regions, North, South, Midlands and Eastern London. So the action learning set gives you a really practical opportunity to work with your peers, again, on real world problems. So somebody might bring along a particular organisational issue they've got, so they're in conflict if they're a provider organisation with their CCG, or it may be something, I find it really difficult to work with my current line manager, a whole range of issues people bring to action learning sets and have the opportunity to work with their colleagues on. At the 3-day National Development Centre, as I said, it's what we call an experiential learning experience. So it's not like a usual leadership course, which is why we ask for a leadership course first. They're a group exercise that gets you to work through a scenario. It's a system issue, and then you do a written task. So once you've understood the scenario, you produce a short piece of writing and you brief a real CEO. You do a group presentation together, summarising what you think the system should do in response to the problem that you're facing. And you're provided with really good quality feedback from FD and CFO observers who sit in on those sessions and are able to observe you in action, and along with your own reflections of what you've done well and what you found more difficult, give you the opportunity to get supportive third-party feedback. It gives you the opportunity to network and, as we've said, build a group of people that are going at a similar stage in their career who you can network with at and beyond the talent pool. And as we said, you get the opportunity to meet the system leaders. So you get a closed session with Bob Alexander and with Paul Baumann in order to ask the questions that you would like to ask them about the challenges of becoming a finance leader. And it ends with the personal development plan, which I mentioned, and the one-on-one coaching. So in terms of hard business results, to date, from the 30 people that joined the talent pool, 2 people have achieved their goal of getting a DOF or CFO role. So Hat Khan was appointed Director of Finance at George Eliot Hospital NHS Trust, and Sheila Stenson has been appointed Director of Finance at Kenton Medway NHS and Social Care Partnership Trust. So a really great success for 2 people already. In terms of the feedback that we've had from participants as to how they felt the experience of going through the process, including the development centre. So in terms of the development centre, really good feedback from people. You can see day 1 slightly lower than day 2 as I think people warmed up, but overall the development centre seemed to meet the needs of the talent pool. In terms of the action learning sets, really interesting here, a lot of the people that took part in the talent pool this year had no experience of action learning sets before, finding them really helpful, and that's true of the coaching as well. In terms of the action learning set, they're finding the sharing of ideas particularly helpful, but also the opportunity to build relationships and to get different perspectives. So I'm going to hand over. It doesn't really matter what I say. What really matters is what people who've been through the talent pools say. So I'm going to hand over to Nicola Tamanis now, who's currently in the talent pool and is Deputy Chief Finance Officer at Northern Care Alliance NHS Group. Nicola.
Thank you. So just briefly, the first slide is just a quick run through my career to date and the skills that I've built up over 25 years, quite frightening to see that. And the way I've just sort of laid it out is how I've built my skills over those years. So starting off with sort of junior roles at a mental health trust, just picking up skills in terms of management accounting and financial accounting skills. Then went on to take my first management post at St Helens and Knowsley. Also gave me the opportunity to develop specialist skills, so I did some costing and things like that. So that was really useful, and it was at that point that I qualified as a CIMA accountant. Then went on back to a mental health trust, and particularly developing my technical skills. So I led on the Foundation Trust application for Greater Manchester Mental Health for the finance element of it, and that really did develop sort of 5-year planning, modelling skills. And then I also took up my first deputy director role. I also did a master's in financial accounting while I was there. And then I sort of came to a bit of a crossroads in my career. So I'd got to Deputy Director of Finance level, and it was then sort of deciding where did I want to go and what did I want to do next. And I felt that I needed more experience, wider experience at the same sort of level, but in a bigger organisation. So I used the experience that I built up as the finance lead for the Foundation Trust application and moved across to East Lancashire Hospitals, where I led their Foundation Trust application as project director. I also was the Deputy Director for Service Development, which allowed me to build up sort of knowledge and experience of clinical services, bidding for tenders, that sort of thing. So it gave me a bit more of a commercial experience. And then took up my role at it's Pennine, the Northern Care Alliance is Pennine. It's a group with Pennine and Salford Royal Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust. So currently I'm Deputy CFO across the 2 organisations at a group level. So that's sort of my career in a nutshell. But what I felt was, again, sort of coming to this level, if I really wanted to get to Director of Finance, what could help me on my way? So that's why I applied to the Aspiring Leaders Talent Pool. If you go on to the next slide, there's sort of the key things that I thought I could get out of the talent pool. So one was about developing my self-awareness. So actually looking at what skills I'd built up. Did I have the knowledge, skills to be able to become a Director of Finance? Also, what I think is really important is actually having the self-confidence in yourself. So actually being part of that network, part of the development day, which, as Claire mentioned earlier, gives you really good feedback on how you've performed during that day, helps you build that self-confidence in your own skills. One of the other key advantages of the talent pool was the networking opportunity. So not only within your own region, I think in the Northwest we have quite a good finance network, but actually nationally looking at what other finance leaders are doing across the country rather than just in your own patch. So that was a really valuable networking opportunity. And also building up through the action learning sets a local network to get very detailed support and feedback from your colleagues. Why I think the talent pool is particularly good is the structured programme that it offers, but with the support of NHS leaders. So Claire mentioned Bob Alexander and Paul Bauman have been key parts of the development day and of the sort of the master classes that have followed up. So you've really got the support of the top leaders from the NHS in this programme. So reflecting back on the what I've taken part in so far, I think particularly the development day. So we knew there was a 2-day development day, but I think what I hadn't quite anticipated was how challenging it was going to be. So it really did challenge you in terms of being part of a sort of questioning yourself, actually pulling together a PDP that was going to challenge your skills. So be prepared for that, really. You've got to really be prepared to put your all into it. And as I mentioned about the observation that you get, so that really did give you some insight into your skills that you have. So you have the current directors of finance and chief executives who are observing you through all the 2-day period, and you get written feedback on how you've performed. So it really did give you insight into yourself. Peer network, so again, that's going back to the action learning set. So that's a great network to build up. And while the program is a 12-month program, there's 6 people in my action learning set, and we've definitely decided that we will continue to meet on a sort of frequent basis going forward and keep that network going. And I've already mentioned about sort of building that self-development. Follow-up support, so following the development day and the masterclasses, as I said, we've got the action learning sets that we're going to continue, and the coaching. So the coach I have is a current chief executive who's been trained in coaching, so full experience of the NHS and how it works, and that has been really valuable. So gives you an opportunity to talk through your personal development plan, any issues that you may have in terms of delivering the personal development plan, or any sort of issues that you've got during your day-to-day working life. So that's been invaluable in terms of getting feedback and helpful hints and tips in terms of how you can manage your working life. So I think I've just put a slide in there about, and it's something Claire mentioned earlier about female leaders. So I've just taken this from the Northwest Finance Skills Development Survey that's done each year, and I think you can clearly see that as women enter the NHS workforce, we are in the majority. So if you look on the top there, from all staff, 66% of the workforce is female. As you get up to DOF level, that drops to 28%. However, I think at 8C and above, we've still got a good representation, so it's pretty much 50-50. So it's what's important about the talent pool is how we encourage, provide the tools to give women the self-confidence to actually make that next step towards a Director of Finance role. So I think the figures sort of speak for themselves there. So just lastly from me, the few things that I'd say is make sure that you get the support of your Director of Finance to apply for the programme, because it's important that you can commit fully and you have every chance of sort of completing everything that's offered to you. It also, if you have got the support of your Director of Finance, they've got the confidence in your abilities to be able to make a success of the talent pool and then going forward in your career. In terms of the interview process and the application process, it is as if you were preparing for a job interview. So you've got to make sure the application is of the highest quality. And then when you go for the regional interview, remembering that you're competing for 30 places nationwide. So you do need to make sure that you prepare fully as you go into it. And just lastly, making sure you've got days set aside, time set aside, and you've got the support of your team to be able to fully participate. So that's just sort of a summary of what I've got out of the programme. Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much, Nicola. Sorry, I did the usual mute thing there. I was happily thinking and chatting on my own. So that's really helpful. And it does really bring it to life when you've got somebody that's actually been through the pool talking. So the self-confidence is a really important issue for women and BAME candidates applying, and for people who have got more introverted preferences in terms of the way they think and communicate. So what we really noticed in the face-to-face interviews is particularly women talked about we rather than I when they were talking about what they'd achieved in those roles. So it's really important when you're thinking about if you're going to apply and the tone of your application, that you need to an extent sell yourself, not overly. Don't claim things that you haven't achieved, never a good thing, but you need to try and have more self-confidence than perhaps you naturally feel you have in order to come across really well in a written application and in face-to-face. But let's move on and hear from Aneel, who's currently in the talent pool and is Head of Financial Strategy Development and Planning at Barts. Aneel.
Thank you, Claire. So yes, I'm probably going to repeat some of the points that Nicola's mentioned, so I'll probably scoot over those parts. But yes, just to introduce myself, in terms of, let me just get control. Okay. Yeah, so let me just briefly cover the bits that cover my career path to date, why I applied for the pool, what I've got out of it, and why I think you should apply for the 2018 pool. So just a quick summary of myself, my career path. Slightly different. I started off in the private sector, so went through training with an accountancy firm, Baker Tilly, in Birmingham, and then moved to London in the early 2000s and went on to work at KPMG. I worked in the hotel, leisure and telecom sector right up until some of you may be aware of the Lehman Brothers and the financial crash in 2008. And that was the turning point in my career when I actually moved into health, staying with KPMG, but decided to change focus. That was my first taster of the NHS. And I joined an organization called Monitor on secondment. And Monitor in those days, this is going back about 10 years, was very much an aggressive, quite tight regulator from what we know of the NHSI today. But that's all useful grounding and experience. I went on to join the Royal Free, which, as it happens, was applying for FT status but had been deferred. I joined the Royal Free as a Deputy Director of Finance, and in the first week found that the interim CFO and the interim Deputy Director of Finance both moved on in rapid succession. So it wasn't the greatest introduction to a new organization, but it was one that sort of introduced the factor of working in change during what was very an unsettling period for that organization, and quite difficult for me. So I lasted there about 15 months when I went through another series of board changes and managers there. I stayed for 2 year ends as the Deputy Director of Finance, then moved on to work actually for Paul Bowman, who at the time was the CFO for NHS London, the Strategic Health Authority. So I worked for Paul and Azra Mukhtar in the London area, managing the PCTs and the NHS trust that were still looking to become FTs. As some of you may know, the SHAs and PCTs all were restructured into CCGs and then NHS TDA and NHS England. And at that time, I moved on to join Barts Health, which was a newly merged organisation, a combination of three previously large acute trusts in the northeast of London. And I've been at Barts doing several different roles, actually, in fairness, over the last couple of years, from working on mergers and acquisitions, commercial disposal of land sales, to the standard, if you like, the financial management deputy director role of monthly reporting and year-end planning. So I've, over the past 10 years or so, coupled with private experience, had quite a breadth and a roller coaster of experiences in the past few years. Just moving on, why did I apply for the talent pool? It's fair to say that over the years I have found my own way, and it's been a bit of a meandering route and journey. And what I felt I was lacking was targeted development and the need to actually sharpen my focus to now understanding what it takes to get to the director of finance level or CFO level. And certainly from where I was, say, this time last year, it felt quite elusive and also exclusive. And so it was about understanding, well, what do I need to do? Because I certainly felt that I had the technical skills, but I needed more support in terms of the softer side of it. And certainly, as Nicola mentioned, I felt I needed to broaden my network. Certainly, I felt I had a broad network when I was at the Health Authority, but that over the years, whilst being in Barts, has somewhat diminished, and I felt I needed to reinvigorate that network, and also to raise my profile and to develop my future career, as I suspect many of you do. Just moving on, waiting for the slide.
Is there a problem moving the slide on, Aneel?
Yeah, the slides seem to have frozen. Shall I release control?
Yeah, right. You just swap control back to control. So your next slide, Aneel, is what you've got out. Here it is.
Okay, are we back on track?
Absolutely, yeah, and we can move them forward for you now, just say next.
Okay, so let me just cover what have I got out of it. In terms of the application and interview process, I think this process, it certainly helps you to genuinely think about why do you want to join the pool, what's so special about being part of a group of 30 and having, you might feel taking yourself through a bit of pain and anguish and torture from the way that Nicola and I have described it. But I think what it certainly has helped me to do is think about, well, what can I bring to the pool? But it's all the things around it, getting to the stage of actually applying to the pool. So actually having some development conversations back at work. And for me personally, that hasn't been easy, but it's been a conversation starter to have those conversations with my direct line manager, with my CFO. And there has been a fair amount of change at Barts, and being part of this process has invigorated that and also been a prompt to push that forward, but also the basics of actually just refreshing my CV, writing a covering letter. When you apply for this pool, you do need to apply for it as if you are applying for a real director of finance role. So just going back to the points I was saying earlier about if you feel you have the technical capability and you want the development, then this will certainly, taking part in this process will certainly help you with that. And for me, going in front of a panel interview of 5 directors of finance across London, and some of you may feel when you get to that stage that you actually know some of the panel, it's actually quite challenging, but also the valuable bit for me was getting the interview feedback in a way that on previous interview panels it wouldn't have been in so much depth. So for me, it was a win-win right from the start, even before before we got to the development centre. If we just move on to the next slide. So the development centre, what do you get from that? So I'm just going to really skittle over this. I think the main part for me was the understanding and listening to the current and former CFOs and directors of finance, their routes into their current roles, and the challenges, the tribulations, the trials that they found in getting there. And it's that sort of softer side of actually getting into being able to meet and talk to existing directors of finance and previous directors of finance in how they felt they've done and how they've got there. All of that has been quite useful for me. And as Nicola said, there's specific time with Bob Alexander and with Paul and other CFOs, which I felt was invaluable. There's a taking part in the group scenarios, the exercises, all of those I think you'll find helpful if you go in with an open mind, that it's there to help you. It's not there to necessarily assess you and rank you all out of 10 or rank you as part of the pool of 30, but it's certainly there for you to come out of it thinking, well, yes, these are the areas that I need to focus on and need to shape into the personal development plan. If we can just move on to the next slide. So the key things after the development center, the executive coaching, I think that's really helpful. I've got a very good former director of finance who's now retired but has a significant amount of experience, and meeting him every couple of months has been very helpful. He is very supportive as well as quite challenging and pushing me to think about, well, what do I really need to do next? So a really good sounding board, but also in the suggestions that he provides. A meeting in for an hour, but in those suggestions that he's provided have been really helpful. The action learning sets, again, I've had one so far out of the 4, but that's been quite useful. We've got another one tomorrow, and it is meeting with your peers. In a way, it feels slightly competitive because you're meeting with your fellow colleagues from the pool, but also I think it's the start of building your own network at the peer level, and not seeing your fellow colleagues as competitors, but seeing them actually as colleagues that you'll build relationships with over your professional career. And attending the master classes, that was very helpful. We had Bob Alexander at the last one, so again another opportunity to get FaceTime with Bob. And another networking opportunity as well. We just move on to the next slide. Touching on the points that Claire and Lily raised earlier on, I think for me also one of the reasons for applying was to make sure that I do the best that I can, and I do come from a BAME background. And I think for me, it's about applying for this. I must say that it's not there isn't any positive discrimination here, but certainly if you feel you have the capability, then this program will welcome you. And I think that you can be assured that there are equal opportunities within the program. The program will do whatever it can to give you that equal opportunity. So I think the onus is there on people to really grasp the opportunity, but there is a shortage of women and BAME presence at DOF level, and so I think this program is there to help help you through that and to guide you if that's relevant to you. And I think just onto the final slides, Claire. So the real next steps, and in terms of applying for this, my counsel and guidance to potential applicants would be to speak to your CFOs, to speak to your line managers. They will be aware of this pool, but they will also be able to support you in your personal development. This pool really is about supporting the best staff on merit, but it does mean that you need to have that support. If you don't, it doesn't mean that you won't get through, but it certainly will be a lot more challenging. I think after all of this, you've got to ask yourself, are you ready to take on a CFO, Director of Finance role within the next 12, 24 months? If you think it's longer term and further out, you should think about whether the time is right. I wouldn't discourage you from applying, but I certainly would encourage you to have a conversation with your line manager and CFO about the timeline, and to help them, to help you with that career progression that you're looking for within the time frame. If it is within the next 12 months, then definitely I would recommend that this is a program you should be on. It will certainly help your case. And in terms of developing your case, think about this as a very tight and developed program. You should think about what your unique points are, unique selling points, and that should really flow through all of your application. But there'll be a lot more guidance on the application and what you should include on the website, and no doubt Lily will be able to give you more tips on that side. So I think that's the final slide, Claire.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much, Aneel. Thank you so much, Aneel. I had my microphone on my head. I'm so good at doing this, aren't I? Apologies for that. It was really, really helpful. I think what I particularly picked up from what you said is that your comment, and this is definitely true for us, that it's taking us a while to tune into and to really understand what the barriers are for BAME and female candidates in progressing their careers. So even if you've got feedback in considering applying or applying that you can help, you think will help inform the work we do, we're really keen to hear from you. But I also did want to say that if you're a white male at this point thinking you probably shouldn't bother applying because it's not for you, that absolutely isn't the case. We do want to attract female and BAME candidates. We are really emphasising that. But in terms of who actually gets through, it is a competitive process. We ended up with 50-50 male and female this year. It's likely to be the same next year. So please, absolutely do apply. I really liked Aneel's comment about that from his and Nicola's feedback. Don't think that the development centre and interview process is going to be torture. That's definitely not what we're aiming for. So we're aiming for it to be testing rather than tortuous. But really important that they did emphasise this, that you do need to prepare. So we have a recruitment specialist, Bill Brace, who recruits finance directors for the commercial sector, and Lily will send a link to everyone that expressed an interest in today's session or is on it, and you'll be able to find out more about Bill's advice as to how to prepare your CV and application form in order to represent yourself as best as possible. But a really quick hint and tip is you need to clearly communicate what you've done in terms of your work as a finance professional to date, how you've achieved the goals that you've achieved, and specifically, this is the bit that people miss, what you did to achieve the results that you're talking about. And that needs to be in terms of I, not we. So I'll say that once more. So you need to make sure that in your application you're describing what you've achieved, how specifically you went about achieving it, and what your role was, so what you did to achieve the results. So it's no good saying I'm responsible for 1,000 people with a £2 million budget. Great. What have you actually done? What business results have you achieved? How did you go about achieving those business results? What specifically did you do in order to achieve the results that you're describing? So there will be stuff that we send to you that provides more information on that. But I'd really like to open this up for questions now for the last 10 minutes. And maybe Aneel and Nicola, if people are slow coming forward with questions, you could ask a couple just to get the conversation started. But have we gone? Also, people, don't forget you might be on mute. So if you can't hear your question, it's because your microphone's switched off. So have we got any questions?
I don't necessarily have a question. It's more about an observation about how helpful the session was. Can people hear me? I'm not sure if I've got on mute or not.
Perfect. Can hear you perfectly. Can you just
fine,
say
just
your
checking.
Name? Is that all right to say your name
certainly.
and
I wasn't
organisation?
sure whether people could see that either. No, it's Kate Parriman. I'm Deputy Director of Finance, University Hospitals, Bristol. And I think what brought the session alive to me was hearing our two previous speakers just talk through the practical experience of applying, because I think, having looked at the application form and obviously knowing and understanding the depth of need to prepare for things and to sell yourself and to understand about what you need to do within the process, it's still a piece of paper. And I found this session invaluable in terms of making that piece of paper, which is ultimately what we've got to submit, come alive as to what it is we've got to do with it. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Glad you took part. Thanks for that really specific feedback, Kate. Definitely put in your application your abilities to give specific and relevant feedback.
No, so it was good. And I think the other thing for me is I probably will have questions as I get closer to kind of bringing everything together. And I suppose a question for me then is around, is there a forum or is there something that we could do to answer those?
That's good. We haven't got a forum at the moment. You can definitely drop Lily an email and either she'll come back to you straight away or ask one of us. But I like the idea of a forum. We'll have a think about that.
I've also got a frequently asked questions document that I will post on the Future Focus Finance website as well.
Cool. No, that's fine. And Nicola, I think I met you yesterday at the event in London, because we were in the forum in the afternoon. So
we were.
So again.
Yeah.
That's quite helpful to see the connection there as well, and to see how it all kind of starts to link together. So hugely helpful.
And we're I'm sure Aneel would say this as well through Lily. We're happy to share email addresses, and if you have got specific questions, then we'd be happy to sort of come back to you and or have a chat and get back to you about them.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Brilliant. Has somebody else got a question they'd like to ask or an observation they'd like to make?
Hi, it's Jackie Chai from Dorset Healthcare here. Thank you very much, Nicola and Aneel and Claire, for a really informative presentation. The question is around the practicalities of the interview. How is it structured and how long is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as we keep emphasising, it's a panel of 5. So there's an NHS I or E regional director. Is it I and E, Lily?
I and E, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And there's a director of finance from a provider organisation and a CFO from a CCG on the panel. And then we do make sure that we've got somebody with a BAME background on the panel too. In terms of the structure of the interview, before the interview date itself, you are sent a question and asked to prepare a presentation. Last year, the question, it won't be the same this year. Last year, the question was around what changes you would suggest for the whole system and innovation around the whole NHS system. And the purpose of the presentation is to really for us to understand what your current level of skill and knowledge is around pulling together a communication on a strategic subject. So what we're looking for is how good are your thinking skills strategically? How well are you able to translate those into a decent presentation? 1,000 words on one slide is not great. And then how well are you able to present that orally verbally under pressure in an interview situation. The reason we do that is most DOF and CFO interviews now involve some kind of presentation. So it's to give you an opportunity to practice preparing and presenting a presentation in that kind of environment. And then there are what are called competency-based questions from the panel. So can you give me an example of a time when you led a team in a difficult situation and achieved a business goal? Does that give you a bit more of a feel for the interview? They're about an hour.
I think what I would add to that, Claire, is that when you're going into this interview, it might on one level feel quite abstract that, well, I'm interviewing for a process. But if you treat it as an application for an interview for a director of finance role, be it at your local trust, if you can imagine that and think of, well, what questions will come up? It's a standard type of interview questions that will come up, but you've got to go into it with a view that this is a real interview and to use it as a real interview. So to go into it fully prepared, do your interview practice. Lily or Claire mentioned the tips from Bill Brace. Use your STAR technique because that will help you. That's actually part of the process and part of the support. But what I found is that you can do that, but you'll get really detailed feedback as well from the interview where you might have gone off track, where you might have spent a bit too long, or where you may have been too brief. It's really good interview practice. So, but you've got to treat it as a real interview rather than one that is, well, it's a chat with five very senior CFOs or CEOs. If you do that, you'll get a lot more out of it, and you'll come across in the best way possible. So you've got to prepare for it really well and apply your application in the same way as if it's an application for a real position, as much as it is to get onto the pool itself.
That's really helpful, Aneel. Nicola, have you got anything to add from your experience of the interviews?
Yeah, so I mean, I would support what Aneel said. It is, you know, and as I said in my presentation, it is as if going for a formal interview. I suppose it's just making sure you think through beforehand what you're applying for, you know, to sort of prepare for the questions, as you would, you know, if you were going for a genuine, if you're going for a work-based interview, then you'd go through the criteria, make sure you prepared for questions. Well, it's the same sort of thing. You know, it's making sure, what am I applying for? And, you know, just to try and preempt some of those questions.
That's really good. So, and this, don't overcomplicate this in your heads. So one question that really tripped people up was, why do you want to join the talent pool? So a lot of people had not prepared for the interview question, why do you want to join the talent pool? So I think Nicola and Aneel's advice is really helpful. So think of this as a DOF CFO interview. Think about the kind of questions a panel is going to ask you in order to consider you to join a talent pool, and prepare as long as you can. If you haven't had an interview for a long time outside your own organisation or at all, it is probably best to have a practice interview with somebody, because we all get stale if we don't do interviews regularly. Jackie, anything else on that? Did you feel you understand a bit more about the interview?
That was very helpful. Thank you all. That was good. That was good. Thank you.
Great. So we've definitely got time for another question. Is there somebody else that would like to ask a question or share an observation?
Hi, this is Jill Savory.
Hi, Jill.
I've got a question, but having listened to the presentation and having thought about the talent pool over the last few weeks, I'm not 100% sure I'm quite ready for that in the next 12 months, you know, to get to the stage of being a CFO or a DOF within the next 12 months. Is there any kind of stepping stone between where I am now and getting to the talent pool, or is it from one big leap kind of thing, if we're not ready just yet?
That's really helpful question, Jill. So Future Focus Finance are also aiming to set up some aspiring finance leaders networks that are designed exactly to meet that need. So people that definitely have their eye on a DOF or CFO role, but don't feel that they want to progress now or in the next 12 months, the networks are who are relevant for them. So if it's okay with you, Jill, we'll make sure that Sophie Rowe, who is setting up the networks for FFF, has your name to send you further information. There is also information on the FFF website for you to register your interest. But yeah, and Sophie would be really interested to talk specifically to people who are thinking and feeling like that about what they would like from the network in order to support their transition over the time frame that works for them into a DOF or CFO role. So that's absolutely fine. We know that there are some people who do look at this talent pool and the process and decide they're not ready yet, but they might be in future years. And it'd be sensible if the system was actively doing things that supported you during that time, rather than just leaving you out in the sticks and then hoping that you might be ready in 4 years' time.
Yeah.
What I would add to that, Jill, is that I don't think there's a cut-off in terms of it has to be 12 months. I think that's a guide. It could be 18 months. But I think if you've come to that decision through a few conversations with different people at your current workplace, and maybe people that you've previously worked for, or your network, and it's a balanced view, as well as your own, yourself saying, actually, yes, after having spoken to trusted advisors, if you like, that you've come to that view, then I think that's quite a reasonable place to be, and you can formulate a plan around that. But if it's something where actually it just sounds a bit, it is going to be challenging, it is a tough process, and there's other priorities that you'd rather do, I would say have a couple of conversations, because there can be a bit of anxiety about throwing yourself into this. Sometimes actually putting yourself through the process and seeing where you get to can be a useful learning experience, if you see it as a learning experience, to apply for it, because it'll give you feedback at every stage, whatever stage you get to. So even if it's just application, to say, you know what, your application was good, but it wasn't quite good enough. It'll say, focus on these areas. And that might be useful development that you take into next year's application or the year after. It's not quite as brutal as the X Factor or that, and neither is it on show, but it'll certainly give you exposure. And I think it's, in that way, I would encourage you to do it if you think, well, actually, it's not 12 months, but it might be 18 months or 2 years away. If that's the balanced view that you've come to after having a few conversations with people in your network, then I would still probably encourage you to apply. But at risk that Claire or Lily might say, well, we don't want 400 applications, thank you, Aneel. We'd like to keep it reasonably tight. But yeah, you can make that judgment.
Brilliant.
Yeah. To be honest, my concerns are more not about skills; it's more wider knowledge, because my NHS experience is all commissioning based, and so I think perhaps I need to get the acute experience as well before I take the step to the next level. So that's kind of what's holding me back at the moment, I think.
Jill, that's really, really relevant point to raise. So what we're looking for in an application is your understanding of a wider system view. So if you've only worked in the provider or the commissioning environment, or in an infrastructure body like NHS England, the reality is that your understanding of the wider system is probably more limited than somebody who's worked in a range of organisations. What will help your application is if you are clear about your strengths and areas for development, and show real self-awareness around what you know, but also what you know you need to learn. So I'm back on the Aneel side, encouraging you to consider applying. It may be that you are unsuccessful, but you'll get very specific feedback about the kind of work experience that you may want to seek in order to get the breadth of wider system knowledge that would definitely, you're right, help you move into a DOF or CFO role quickly.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that on board then. Thank you.
In terms of Aneel's lovely comment, although I have to say, not as brutal as the X Factor, is probably my favourite quote of the day. I'm glad to hear it wasn't as brutal as that, Aneel. But in terms of Claire and Lily and 400 applications, that would definitely be a lovely problem to have. What I think we definitely know from this year's talent pool is there are some tremendously talented finance professionals out there who probably would not have been successful if they applied for DOF or CFO roles in the previous route, which was basically give it a shot with no support. So we really do want to hear from you. We do really want people to apply. And as Aneel said, we've done extra things this year. We hope that the process of applying will support your future career development, even if you're not successful at getting into this year's pool. Good. We are just over the hour, so I'm going, unless there's anything burning, I'm planning to draw this to a close. If you have a question that we haven't answered today, then please just drop us an email and we'd be really happy to take questions outside. We're happy to have telephone meetings with people if they've got specific questions about the talent pool or about the application process that we can help with. But I'm just going to say a huge thank you to Nicola and to Aneel for making the time to take part in today's call. It is what is really valuable to potential applicants, is hearing from people that are currently in the pool. So thank you both very much. Thank you everyone that's taken the time to listen to today. We'd love to have your feedback, so just found it useful or anything specific that you've got time to feedback to us would be brilliant. Super.
Hello everyone, my name's Bill Brace from Bill Brace Recruitment. I'm sorry you weren't able to attend my recruitment interview technique course over the last couple of days, but hopefully this is the next best thing. But who am I? Why are you listening to this? As you can see on the screen there, I am long in the tooth as a recruiter. I have been in the recruitment game, either as an internal recruiter for large organisations like BT, or I've been working with a number of household recruitment agencies that you probably all know well. Over several years, working through several recruitment sectors, especially finance and accountancy. I am an accountant myself. I currently run a recruitment practice where I coach, train job seekers up to executive level, and on a daily basis I am recruiting for accountants and placing them in roles. And as I'm doing this webinar right now, I have a number of accountants out on interview that I've prepped, coached to get through and obviously land that job. Actively recruiting around the southeast, Essex and London. So this isn't a theoretical or conceptual walk through the process. It's fairly boot camping approach, because this needs to be done, this needs to be managed. One of the reasons I'm conducting this session, there's no competition here, there's no conflict of interests. I don't recruit into the NHS. I have in the past, but I'm not at the moment. So I'm not headhunting you, and I'm not going to be a conflict with anybody else that's through the process. So that's me. Let me tell you what we're going to cover off here. This is a whistle-stop 10-minute tour. This part of the process probably took half an hour in the session itself. And what is the objective and what's the content? So, first and foremost, before you start looking at your CV, the absolute key to success here is understanding the capabilities of the talent pool selection process. If it wasn't this talent pool, it could be another job. A key learning point for you guys is whenever you're submitting your CV, you need to submit your CV, which will be customized to the process, to a mission statement, people values. The basic error that everyone makes is that you're sending generic CVs to a very specific process, and invariably you're going to be deselected because someone's wondering why you've sent this CV to this process, and you're making the reader of the CV work too hard to work out how good you are and why you should be selected. So, as the outset, there is a very specific process. The capabilities come under 3 headings, and we'll look at them in a little bit more detail. The CVs that I've seen something of 30, 40 CVs that have been submitted to me to have a look at, to just see generically what the strength of candidate is. I haven't seen one CV that I would have submitted to this process. And in fact, some of them have been fairly shocking in terms of the content. I've had 9-page CVs. I've had CVs on size 15 font, which have just stretched on and on and on. I've seen CVs which are effectively just a record of everything that you've ever done, and none of them have been bespoke and will be suitable for success in this process. So I would suggest the 60, 70 people that have attended the last 4 sessions have all gone away with a target to revamp their CV. It's a big task. So let's have a look at why that is. Invariably, the readers of this process know that you would have seen a breakdown of the core capabilities. You would have seen a breakdown of the application form that goes alongside your CV. And the application form is asking you to sell yourself based on those core capabilities. And there should be a match between the application form and what's on your CV. If there's disparity, if you put loads of effort into the application form and just send your generic bog standard CV, that's going to look odd. And you will be competing against people that have just put more effort into the CV. So you've got to match experience, skills that are relevant to the role. Please look at your CV in a fresh light. If it's unsuitable, start again. I've said to everyone, invariably from the CVs that I've seen, tear them up and start all over again. Drop the jobs that you had 20 years ago. No one's interested. They're interested in the key components of the job that you're doing now, and maybe the job before, and your key profiles. So when we look at the template, be aware that I'm looking for you to showcase yourself against the application form. So before you start constructing your CV, these are the core capabilities that you need to match up to. Work backwards from interview to presentation to application form to CV. There needs to be commonality. There needs to be your key selling points that are punching home. So if you look at your current CV and it is just a list of tasks that you've completed over the years with no achievements, or if you've got a bank of achievements but no context about where those achievements were carried out and how powerful they were, then you're in the wrong place. That's why you need to start from scratch. If you have a key achievement on your CV, which is about leading strategic direction and change, and it's lost in the noise of a 9-page CV, you've got to bring that to the fore, because that could be the one story that gets you into the next stage. If you're looking at system leadership and developing change, building external relationships, which most accountants wouldn't necessarily have to do, but if you've done that and you've done that successfully, I want to see that shining out in your CV, and I need to see that example writ large in the application form, because the application form is tough. You've got a question about every single one of these, and you really need to think about that story that you want to sell, because you might need to be talking in front of a 5-panel interview to sell that story and run that story home, and it needs to shine out on your CV. So how do you do that? How do you do that on your CV? Well, let's have a look at my template. First things first, you need to have a powerful profile. Your profile is your elevator pitch. It isn't just a description of you as an individual saying you're nice and fluffy and energetic and enthusiastic. Bin all of that. Look at what I say here. This needs to be, your profile is adapted for every job that you go for, because it's going to be looking for core capabilities that you possess. And if you tell them that at the profile stage, it will gauge their interest and allow them to move down. Some of you guys, I've seen the CVs where there's no profile. I have no idea who you are. It's got key skills, and some of them, the ability to manipulate a spreadsheet. They're not interested. Technical skills are taken as read because of your qualifications, and it's also taken as read if you put it in your profile. If you have 15 years post-qualification, SEMA, SIPFA, that's going to grab their attention. If you're a deputy, if you've deputised, that needs to be in the forefront of your profile, because that engages the reader, and then they're interested in looking at your CVs. Key skills, it sounds obvious, the key skills, the 6 bullet points, it could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 8. However, are they relevant to those core capabilities? And if they are you then going to back it up on your CV under the employment history by having the achievements that illustrate to me why you think you have those core skills? So if you're saying you've got tangible and demonstrable achievements, great. Where are they? That's what I'm going to be looking for. So let's just quickly flow through this CV, because it should be obvious. The employment history, look at the CV, 2 pages. Look at the font, small. Look at the bullet points. Why is it bullet pointed? Because you can move them around. You can move the bottom of your, possibly the thing that's at the bottom of your description of your skills at the moment should be at the very top, because you're going to engage the reader. They read a CV from the top. The 8th bullet point should be the 8th least important achievement. So tell people what you did, but your achievements prove how good you were. But be conscious that you've got to be accurate. The achievement that goes in under the employment history is something they're going to talk to you about, and it should flow through the application form, your presentation, and at interview. So you've got to make sure that it's accurate and that other people can back you up, because probably the reader would know your organisation, would know who you worked for, and might be able to sound check whether this was actually accurate. Leadership is a key component of this whole process. And it says here, if you manage people, mention how many. If you worked in a team, mention how many. So if you've led an initiative, give a very brief example of how important that process was and what made that process up. Now, if you find that in your current or previous job, this is now taking up 1 or 2 pages, that's fine, because the job that you had 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they're least important. And I would say when you're looking to save space, you save it from the bottom upwards. So your interest, if you've taken up all the space, take it out. Testimonials, maybe if you've got a great testimonial, that can go in your application form, or it can go in your presentation. Professional memberships and awards, what you did in the Scouts is of no interest to anyone. So take all that stuff out, just focus. If you've been on professional training, 9th Evan, make sure that's in. And in fact, put that in your profile, because that will show if you've got leadership skills, you've actually studied in it. And that takes you out from the competition, makes you stand out. Education, year, the job titles, make sure you've got good tight dates that tell the reader where you pick these skills up from and where it's appropriate. So work down from the bottom, a brief description of the company name, then focus on achievements. then go to the next job, where you were, give a context for the role. This isn't a list of tasks. If you're a DOF, deputy DOF, deputising for a DOF, head of finance, everyone knows the kind of things that you're doing. We just want to focus on the achievements. And if the work experience that you've got is irrelevant, please leave it out. If you're 2 to 3 pages, that really is the max. If don't hang on to old jobs, old work history, old achievements, if they're not really an achievement and they're not going to be demonstrable or tangible. Now, that's a real whistle-stop tour through the whole thing. I would suggest to you, get your CV 90% complete as a redraft, then go into the application form process. And once you've honed your examples, because it's a competency-based application process, then go back to your CV and finalise both at the same time, because they're going to be submitted at the same time. That's a whistle-stop tour. I'm sure my time is up. If you have any questions about this, if it made sense, it didn't make sense, you want to sense check something, I'm happy to help, but there could be many, many of you. Put your questions to Lily. If there's something I can do to help, I'm willing to do so. However, Lily will manage my time, and she understands the process that the attendees at the courses have been through. I hope that helps. Whistle-stop tour, match the CV to the capabilities, to the application form, and you can't go far wrong. Thank you very much. My name's been Bill Brace. Thank you.